8 years into practice, a patient sat across from me and said something I wasn't ready for. It was a Tuesday, late afternoon. Her appointment was the last one on my schedule that day. I remember it clearly because of what happened next. She put a spreadsheet on the desk between us, a printed one, actual paper, not a phone screen. 14 months of quarterly labs. Supplement names down one column, dosing times down another, and a third column where she'd written how she felt that week, in her own words. Tired, better, same as last time. If I'm honest, she tracked her own case more carefully than most practitioners I know. Her ferritin, that's the marker for how much iron your body's got sitting in reserve, had gone from 34 up to 71. Her TSH, that's the signal your brain sends telling your thyroid how hard to work, was under 2. Free T3 was up. That's the active form of thyroid hormone your body can actually use. Vitamin D was corrected. Every single number on that page was moving in the right direction. I remember looking at it and thinking, on paper, this is what a success story looks like. Her hair was still coming out in the shower every morning. She looked at me and asked, calm, which somehow made it worse than if she'd been angry. I'd done everything you told me. Why isn't it working? I didn't have an answer. Not a real one. Nothing that would have meant anything to her, sitting there with that spreadsheet after 14 months. I want to tell you what happened after that appointment. It's the reason I practice the way I do now, and it might be the reason your hair hasn't responded to anything you've tried either. If you've been looking for a hair loss treatment for women that actually explains what's happening, instead of just guessing at the next supplement, this is where that answer starts. I'm a licensed TCM practitioner. I've been doing this over 10 years now, and I still think about that appointment more than almost any other one I've had. Here's what I'm going to walk you through. What happened with that patient, what I found once I finally asked the right question, and the 4 systems inside your body that actually decide whether your hair can grow. By the end of this, you'll know how to figure out which one broke first in your case, using symptoms you probably already have and have already been living with. What I'm about to show you isn't a new supplement, and it's not a different ferritin target. It's a question I should have been asking from day one. Once you hear it, I think a lot of what hasn't worked for you is going to make a different kind of sense. Let's get back to that appointment. I'll call her Rachel. She was 38. She first came in to see me about 18 months before that appointment. By then, she'd been shedding for 6 months. She called it noticeable. You know that phase. You start counting hairs in the shower. The number starts to scare you. She wasn't dramatic about it. If anything, the opposite. She was precise, methodical. She worked in project management. She treated hair loss the same way she'd treat a stalled project at work. There's a problem, you find it, you solve it. At that first appointment, she'd brought a printed list of everything she'd already tried. I remember because most patients tell me from memory, and half of it comes out later, in bits, over a few visits. Rachel had it typed out before she ever sat down. By the time she came to me, she'd already done the rounds. A GP visit, labs ordered, told everything looked fine. A dermatologist got the Rogaine pamphlet, told to lower her stress. She'd found the functional medicine info on ferritin on her own, pushed it to get tested, found out hers sat at 34. She'd already started iron before she ever sat down with me. So this wasn't a beginner case. She knew what ferritin was. She'd read about dosing it every other day instead of every day. She knew zinc and copper were connected somehow, even if she couldn't explain how. She walked in already informed, which honestly made it harder. The easy wins, the ones that help someone early on, she'd already made every one. Those first few months looked like this, and it matters for what comes later. Over the next 14 months, we mapped out a plan together. She worked on bringing her ferritin up slowly, alternating her dosing days. She supported her thyroid conversion with selenium and zinc, careful with the dosing, given what she was already taking. I added calming herbs, ones aimed at cortisol, once a new panel showed her stress hormone pattern was off. Every 3 months, she got a new panel, and we adjusted from there. She did it, all of it. Every appointment, she came back with proof. Her supplement log, her symptom notes. Once she brought a photo of her shower drain, dated, because she wanted me to see it wasn't her imagination. And her hair kept falling out. Not all at once, just steadily. Her drain count, which she logged herself, went from 150 down to 120 on a good week. That's technically better, but 120 strands a day is still a lot. After 14 months, she was owed more than that. She'd done the work. She'd shown up for every appointment, adjusted every dose exactly the way we discussed, and the number on her spreadsheet had barely moved for the last 4 months straight. Here's the part I need to tell you. It's not comfortable. Every single thing I recommended was backed by real research. It was still wrong. I was optimizing variables. Ferritin's low, bring it up. TSH a little high, support conversion. Cortisol's elevated, add calming herbs. Every number had a reason. The reasoning held up fine on its own. But under all of it sat an assumption. I'd never questioned it. It's baked so deep into functional medicine that it doesn't even feel like an assumption. It just feels like how things work. The assumption: fix the numbers, the body responds. Think of it like fixing a car by only ever checking the dashboard lights. Oil lights on, you top up the oil. Check engine lights on, you clear the code. Every light you address is a real fix for a real problem. But if the actual issue is a cracked fuel line somewhere upstream of all those lights, you can keep the dashboard perfectly clean and the car still won't drive right. That's what I was doing with labs, clearing lights, never once asking what was upstream of all of them. That assumption has an edge, a point where it just stops working, where you've done everything it told you to do, and you're still sitting across from a woman who's losing her hair. Rachel had hit that edge, and she wasn't the only one. Looking back at my notes from around that same period, I had at least 4 other patients running the exact same pattern. Labs improving, symptoms holding steady or getting worse. I didn't connect them at the time. I treated each one as its own confusing exception. It took Rachel's appointment and the spreadsheet specifically, laid out in black and white over 14 months, for me to see it wasn't 4 separate mysteries. It was one mistake repeating. Let me show you what that looks like on paper. I'd guess a lot of you watching are living at this exact edge right now. Ferritin at 70 or higher, maybe 74, maybe 82. Your practitioner set that as the target. You hit it. Nothing changed. Shedding kept going. Now you're told to give it more time, or look at something else. Maybe it's stress. Maybe it's genetics. The model hit its edge. It just never tells you that part. It only points at the next number. What I hadn't done, what the model never built in, was ask one question before recommending anything. Not which number is off. The question is, which of the 4 systems in her body broke first? Those are 2 different questions. Say you've spent a year, maybe 2, asking the first one, optimizing numbers, trying supplements, chasing markers into range, and your hair is still doing what it was doing before. There's a real chance nobody has ever asked you the second question. That's what this whole video is about. Before I get into what happened with Rachel, one thing needs to be clear. This isn't a supplement. It's not a new ferritin target. It's a different layer of diagnosis, one nobody had put in front of her before. Once you get it, I think you'll look back on everything you've tried and it'll read differently. Let me explain what I mean by 4 systems. I don't want to just hand you a term. Let me show you what's under it. There are 4 systems inside your body. Each one decides if your hair can grow. I'll name each one so you can start guessing where you fit. Circulation and delivery. Your follicles sit at the end of the line, kind of like the last house on a street. It only gets water once every house before it has a turn. When blood flow to your scalp gets tight, your body sends nutrients to the organs it thinks matter most first. Heart, brain, kidneys. Your hair gets whatever's left. Some days that's nothing. You can have perfect ferritin, perfect thyroid numbers, and still have follicles that are starving, because the road there is closed. Digestion and absorption. This one trips people up the most. You're eating well, supplementing, doing all the right things. But if your gut can't pull nutrients out of what you eat and move them into your blood, none of it reaches your follicles. It goes in one end and comes out the other. There are 4 separate failure points hiding inside this one system. That's part of why just take more iron doesn't fix it for everyone. Hormone stress signaling. Every follicle has a spot on it that reads cortisol, your stress hormone. When your stress system gets thrown off, your follicles get told it isn't safe to grow right now. So they stop and wait. Here's the part nobody tells you. They keep waiting even after the stress is long gone, because that signal doesn't reset on its own. Inflammation and reactivity. This one has a signature you can spot. Waves, not a steady drip. 3 good weeks, then a rough month. That's your immune system cycling through your scalp, usually driven by your gut, usually connected to food, in a way a lot of women have already noticed but never connected to their hair. Here's the thing it took me 8 years to actually see. These 4 systems run in order. When one breaks, everything below it breaks too. Whichever one broke first, the one at the top, decides the order everything else has to happen in. If your absorption is broken, it doesn't matter how good your circulation is. There's nothing in your blood to deliver it in the first place. If your cortisol rhythm is off, your circulation work will give you patchy results, because high cortisol squeezes your blood vessels shut. These systems talk to each other, and that conversation has a pecking order. That's what I missed with Rachel, not the pieces I was recommending, the order, which system had actually broken first in her body. Before I get into the four systems in more depth, let's stop on one number specifically, ferritin. It's the one almost every woman watching this has already had tested. It's also the number most practitioners get wrong without realizing it. Ferritin is a storage protein. Think of it kind of like a savings account. It tells you how much iron your body has put away for later. That's the whole job. It doesn't tell you if the iron can get out of the account and into your hands when you need it. It just tells you the balance. Here's where it gets confusing. Most standard labs list normal ferritin is anywhere from 15 to 150. If your result comes back at 18, the lab flags it green, normal, no follow-up. But the research on hair loss points somewhere else. Clinical convention among practitioners who actually treat hair loss puts the functional threshold much higher than the disease cutoff, above 70. Not 15, not 40, 70. That's the number where follicles reliably have enough iron on hand to run their growth cycle. Below that, you can be technically normal and still be functionally short. So there are two different columns here. The disease column, which is what your lab report prints, and the hair growth column, which almost nobody prints anywhere. A woman with ferritin at 40 gets told she's fine, not anemic, nothing to worry about. She walks out with an answer that's medically true and completely useless for her hair. I should be fair here for a second. I don't think this is doctors being careless. The disease range exists to catch iron deficiency anemia, a genuinely dangerous condition. 15 is a reasonable cutoff for that job. It was never built to answer a different question. Which system does your hair need functioning to grow? Same test, different job. Nobody told you which job it was doing when they handed you the result. Now here's the part that trips people up. Even when they know the 70 number, even at 74, even at 82, that number alone still doesn't guarantee your hair is getting the iron. Ferritin only tells you what's in storage. It doesn't tell you whether the door out of storage is open. That's where two other things come in, and they matter a lot later in this video. The first is transferrin. Think of transferrin kind of like a delivery truck. Iron doesn't just float freely through your blood. It has to get loaded onto transferrin first. Then transferrin carries it to wherever your body needs it, hair follicles included. The second is ceruloplasmin. This one's less well known, and it matters. Ceruloplasmin is a protein your body makes using copper. Its job is to load the iron onto that delivery truck in the first place. Without enough ceruloplasmin, iron can sit in storage, ferritin looking perfectly fine on paper, and never get loaded onto the truck. It just sits there. The savings account has money in it. The teller window is closed. I had a patient a few years before Rachel. I'll call her Denise. She came in with ferritin at 61. Good enough by most standards. Her hair was still thinning at the crown, slow and steady, for going on 2 years. She added ceruloplasmin to her next panel almost as an afterthought, since nothing else explained the gap. It came back low. Once she addressed that, not her ferritin, her ceruloplasmin, her shedding started easing within about 7 weeks. I bring up Denise because at the time I thought of her as a one-off, an unusual case. It wasn't until Rachel, years later, that I understood Denise wasn't unusual at all. She was an early version of the exact same problem. I just hadn't built the framework yet to see it as a pattern instead of an exception. So if you've been told your ferritin is fine, or even that it's optimized, above 70, above 80, and your hair is still falling out, the ferritin number by itself was never going to be the full answer. It's one piece of a longer chain. Storage, loading, delivery. Then whatever's happening at the follicle itself. Any break in that chain produces the exact same result you're living with right now. Ferritin that looks fine, hair that keeps falling. That's not a reason to stop testing ferritin. It's a reason to test the rest of the chain too, and to know that one number was never built to carry this much weight on its own. Now let's look at what actually changed once we found the upstream break. Then I'll connect it to the wider framework. Rachel is just one presentation of one pattern. There are 3 others. Depending on which one you're in, the whole protocol looks different. Don't go anywhere. This is where it gets useful. Let me walk you through these 4 in more depth. Try placing yourself somewhere in here as we go. Let's start with circulation and delivery. The scalp is at the edge of your body. When you're under stress, poor nutrition, hormone problems, illness, doesn't matter which, blood flow to the scalp is the first thing your body cuts back. Your body is busy protecting the core organs. The scalp is dead last in line. The signs of this pattern are things most people have already normalized. Cold hands and feet, even in a warm room, a scalp that feels cooler than the rest of your head, a tight scalp that doesn't move much when you rub it, topicals that just sit on top and never really sink in, thinning at the temples and crown, the highest ground, where blood has to work hardest to reach. This is exactly why 8 months of rosemary oil can do nothing at all. A 2015 study put rosemary oil up against 2% minoxidil and found them about equal. But if your delivery route is blocked, you're putting the right product on a closed road. The product's not the problem. The road was never open. Here's a real example because pattern 1 is easy to miss when you're the one living inside it. A patient named Jenna, 29, had mentioned a cold tight scalp at 3 separate appointments with 3 different practitioners over about a year and a half. Each time she was told it wasn't significant, just how her scalp was. She tried topicals that never seemed to sink in and assumed the products were the problem. Once we identified pattern 1 as her primary, the plan didn't touch her topicals at all for the first 2 weeks. We worked entirely on opening the circulation route first, scalp massage timed in a specific way, warming herbs, a short list of foods that support peripheral blood flow, and by week 8, her shed count had gone from over 150 a day to into the mid-70s, and holding there. Her sister mentioned, without being told anything, that her hair looked heavier. Jenna hadn't said a word to her about any of it. The detail that stuck with me was the scalp temperature. Once circulation showed up, the same rosemary serum she'd already owned for months, sitting unused in a drawer, started actually working. She hadn't needed a new product. She needed the road open before the product could do anything at all. Next is digestion and absorption. 4 separate failure points live inside this one system. They matter because from the outside, they all look the same. Supplements not working, ferritin not moving, but each one needs a completely different fix. First, low stomach acid. Iron needs an acidic stomach to turn into something your gut can absorb. Chronic stress lowers stomach acid. So do some heartburn medications. So does a stomach infection called H. pylori. When your acid is low, the iron you swallow goes in and mostly comes right back out. Your supplement isn't broken. The environment it needs to work in is. Second, damage to your gut lining. Conditions like SIBO, celiac disease, or ongoing gut inflammation all damage the cells inside your small intestine. Those cells are exactly where absorption happens. Fewer healthy cells means less iron gets through. You can take the right supplement at the right time and still not absorb it, because the surface doing the absorbing is damaged. Third, hepcidin. This is one almost every practitioner misses. Hepcidin is a hormone your liver makes when it senses inflammation somewhere in your body. Its job is to block iron from entering your blood. It does that by shutting a gate in your gut wall. So here's what's actually happening. You take iron, it reaches that gate, hepcidin says no, the iron never crosses. It never reaches your blood. Your ferritin stays low, and you get told to take more iron. This is also why taking iron every single day can work against you. Each dose spikes your hepcidin for about a day. Tomorrow's dose walks straight into a gate that's still shut. 2 clinical trials in women low on iron, which I'll have linked below in the description, found that dosing every other day worked better than dosing every day. Spacing it out lets hepcidin drop back down before the next dose shows up. Fourth, your gut bacteria. About 1/5 of your thyroid hormone conversion happens in your gut. That's your body turning T4 into T3, the active form your follicles actually use. When your gut bacteria are thrown off, that conversion drops. So your TSH can look fine. Your T4 can look fine. And if you've been on antibiotics or dealt with SIBO, you could still have a T3 problem that no standard thyroid test will ever catch. I know that's a lot at once. Here's why I went through all 4 anyway. Each one is a truly different problem. Each needs a truly different fix. And the reason nothing's worked for you might be exactly this specific. You have the third one, hepcidin, and every iron plan you've ever been handed assumed you had the first one. Hormone stress signaling and inflammation are the other 2 patterns. Let's get into them. But first, what happened with Rachel once we knew what was going on? Her plan barely changed. It was actually kind of simple, and she responded faster than I expected. Third is hormone stress signaling. Every hair follicle has a spot that reads cortisol, your stress hormone. A 2021 study, linked below, found that high cortisol keeps follicle stem cells stuck in a resting state longer. They just sit there. They don't restart growth on their own. Most people already know about the 2 to 4 month lag. You shed months after the stressful thing happened, not during it. Follicles rest during the stress itself. Then they all let go at once, a few months later. That part's fairly well known by now. But what doesn't get talked about is what comes after. The stress can be totally over. Life's calmer, you feel better. But your cortisol rhythm, that daily rise in the morning and drop at night, doesn't reset just because the hard part ended. It can stay off for months, sometimes longer. So you're doing fine emotionally. Your cortisol is still high in the evening when it should be dropping. Your follicles are still getting the not safe to grow signal, and your hair keeps falling out, even though you honestly can't point to what's still causing it. Clinically, I see three patterns here: high in the evening when it should be dropping, flat all day because the whole system's burned out, or a sharp spike in the morning that crashes by midday. Each one needs a different approach. I get cautious when someone's been taking ashwagandha long term without knowing which pattern they're in. Ashwagandha lowers cortisol. If yours runs high, great, that's the right tool. But if your curve's already flat, if you're already burned out and running low, it can push what little you've got left even lower. The herb's not the problem. Aimed at the wrong pattern, it can make things worse. A patient named Lisa, 41, had a cortisol curve that ran high in the evening. Her scalp felt tight and hot, her words, for over a year. She'd stopped weighing her hair down because her part got so wide that it was the first thing people noticed. Her kids had started asking why she always wore a hat. Her pattern traced back to a stretch of sustained pressure at work about 2 years earlier. The job situation had resolved. Her cortisol rhythm hadn't. It was still running high at exactly the hour it should have been dropping. I added calming herbs for the evening. She started taking magnesium about an hour before bed and put a hard stop to screens after 9 at night, since blue light in the evening keeps cortisol elevated right when it needs to fall. By month 3, that tight, hot feeling in her scalp had calmed down. Her part didn't look as stark anymore. Her kids stopped asking about the hat. Last is inflammation and reactivity. This one has a signature too: wave-like shedding. Not a steady daily loss. 3 good weeks, then a rough month. Then it settles. Then it spikes again. That wave pattern is your immune system cycling. Your gut makes compounds that help keep your immune system in check. When your gut bacteria are out of balance, those compounds drop. Inflammation rises in waves. Your follicles follow the same rhythm, getting pushed out of the growth cycle in the same waves. There's a food connection a lot of women notice and never connect to their hair. Shedding that gets worse a day or two after eating certain foods. Gluten, dairy, sugar. That timing isn't random. It's your body telling you which pattern is driving this. Pattern 4. If you've been treating it like a ferritin problem or a thyroid problem, you've been fixing the wrong thing this whole time. A patient named Anita, 52, had gone through a telehealth platform before finding me. She filled out a quiz online and got prescribed minoxidil within a few minutes. No follow-up questions about her scalp beyond a photo. But her presentation was reactive, oily and itchy in waves, worse after certain meals, nothing to do with the kind of circulation issue minoxidil is built to help. Wrong tool for her actual pattern entirely. Once we identified pattern 4, she started a probiotic, took a 4-week break from the foods that seemed to trigger her worst weeks, and I added 2 herbs used traditionally to calm gut inflammation, taken as a daily tea. By 12 weeks, she had visible new growth along her hairline. Her husband asked at month 3 if she'd done something different with her hair. She hadn't touched a single product differently. She just stopped feeding the inflammation that was driving the whole pattern. Before I get back to Rachel, let me give you a quick way to place yourself in one of these 4 right now without any test at all. This won't be exact. It's a starting guess, not a diagnosis, but it's a place to start. If your hands and feet run cold, your scalp feels tight, and topicals never seem to sink in, you're probably looking at pattern 1. If you're doing everything right and nothing is moving, if your labs are improving, but your shedding isn't, or if you deal with bloating, gas, or irregular digestion alongside the hair loss, that's usually pattern 2. If your shedding started 2 to 4 months after a stretch of real stress, a move, a loss, a work crutch, and it's never fully let up since, even though the stress itself passed, look at pattern 3. If your shedding comes in waves, good weeks and bad weeks, and you've noticed it gets worse a day or 2 after certain foods, that's pattern 4. Most women read that list and land on 2, not 1. That's normal. That's a primary and secondary pattern working together, and it's exactly why the full assessment sorts out with actual scoring instead of a guess. But even a rough guess is more direction than most women have had up to this point. So, Rachel. Her results came back showing something specific. Ceruloplasmin depletion. That was the upstream break. 14 months of zinc, with no copper alongside it, had quietly disabled the exact step that moves iron out of storage and into her blood. Once we saw that, the protocol change was actually pretty simple. Ceruloplasmin, if you haven't heard that word, is a protein your body makes using copper. Its job is to release iron from storage and hand it off, so it can travel to where it's needed, hair follicles included. Without enough of it, the iron just sits in storage doing nothing. She switched to alternate day dosing, added copper, kept well apart from her zinc and iron. Added a bit of apple cider vinegar before her main meal to help the stomach acid her iron needed to convert into a usable form. We held off on everything else for 4 weeks and let the absorption side settle. That was it. No new supplements. Fewer supplements, actually. Let me walk through what actually happened week by week. The timeline matters more than the end result. It's not a straight line, and it's not fast. I'd rather show you the real shape of it than a highlight reel. Week 1 and 2, nothing. No change she could point out. I told her this was normal, that the absorption chain needed time to reset before anything downstream would show up. But I know from other patients that this stretch is the hardest one to sit through. You've made a change. You're watching for a sign. There isn't one yet. At week 3, she messaged me, not about her hair, about her digestion. The bloating she'd had after meals, which she'd mentioned at our very first appointment, and which I'd filed away as secondary, not important, was gone. That was the moment I understood the bloating had been part of the exact same upstream problem the whole time. Same gut dysfunction blocking her iron was causing the bloating too. Fix one, you fix both. That moment deserves its own name because it matters for what I'm going to tell you later in this video. That digestion shift, before anything with her hair had changed at all, is what I now call the signal. It's the first internal sign that the system is actually responding, and it almost never shows up as hair. It shows up as something smaller. Digestion easing. A scalp that suddenly doesn't feel tight. Sleep that comes a little easier. Most women miss it completely because they're only watching the drain. Week 6, her shed count dropped. She logged it the way she logged everything, from 120 down to 55. Finally, some evidence. That's the second marker. The number actually turns and holds. Not one good day. A direction that keeps going the same way for more than a week straight. I call that one the turn because that's exactly what it is. The point where the trend line bends. By month 3, her sister mentioned at dinner that her hair looked heavier, healthier. Rachel hadn't said a word to her about any of it. Wasn't even counting on much yet. Someone else just noticed, on their own, without being told to look. That's the third marker, the one where visible growth shows up, usually as new, finer hairs along the part or hairline first. I call that one the return. 3 markers, none of them dramatic on their own. The digestion easing, the number turning, someone else noticing before you said anything. Stack them in order, and that's what real recovery actually looks like from the inside. Not a single before and after photo, a slow accumulation of small, specific, boring evidence. That's when she sent me the message I still have saved. She wrote, "I think it's finally worked. I don't know exactly when it changed, but I think it's working." Let's look at the framework that came out of that case, and a few others like it. Rachel's one presentation of one pattern. There are 3 more. Here's how to figure out which one you're in, using symptoms you already have, without booking a single new appointment. Stay with me. After Rachel, and a couple other cases that showed me the same gap, I built a structured test, something that would do what I failed to do for 14 months. Ask which system broke first before recommending anything else. The full test in the guide has 40 questions, 10 for each of the 4 systems. You score each one 0, 1, or 2. Whatever scores highest is your primary pattern. Second highest is your secondary. A score of 14 to 20 means that's where the break started. The shedding, the supplements that didn't work, the labs that looked fine, all of it traces back there. 8 to 13 means it's a factor, but probably not the main one. Below 7, and it's likely not driving this right now. There's a tiebreaker too. When 2 patterns land within 2 points of each other, pattern 2 wins. That's digestion and absorption. If your absorption is off, every other fix underperforms, no matter what else you try. Nutrients that aren't absorbing can't reach anywhere else. Once you know your primary pattern, everything follows from it. The herbs, the supplement order, the food choices, the timing on scalp treatments. Most people have a primary pattern and a secondary one. The guide covers the 5 most common pairings. Take pattern 3 and pattern 1 together. That's hormone stress and circulation. High cortisol squeezes your blood vessels shut. Do circulation work while your cortisol's still off, and you'll get patchy results. The 2 patterns work against each other underneath. Calming your nervous system in the evening has to come first. The order matters here. Not as a nice idea, but mechanically. There are a few other pairings worth naming. Chances are you're sitting in one of them right now. Pattern 2 and pattern 4 together. Digestion and inflammation. This one's sneaky. The same gut inflammation that's blocking your absorption is also raising hepcidin. Remember, hepcidin blocks iron from crossing into your blood. Treat the inflammation without touching absorption, or the other way around, and you're only fixing half the loop. Both have to move together. Gut calming and iron timing side by side. Otherwise, you end up back to where you started. Pattern 1 and Pattern 2 together. Circulation and digestion. If your gut isn't absorbing nutrients, there's nothing in your blood worth delivering. Circulation work on its own does close to nothing. But if you only fix absorption and never open the delivery route, the nutrients that do get in still can't reach the follicle. This pairing needs absorption addressed first, 2 to 3 weeks. Then circulation work gets added on top. A patient named Nina had this exact combination, Pattern 2 primary with Pattern 1 running secondary underneath it. She'd spent 16 months checking her mirror every morning before walking to work, adjusting her part, checking again. Her ferritin, like Rachel's, kept rising on paper. Her shedding never responded. Once her ceruloplasmin came back low, absorption came first, then circulation support got layered in around week 3. Her shed count went from 120 to 150 a day down to a consistent 60s, holding there for the first time in over a year. She told me the moment she actually noticed. It was the morning she forgot to check the mirror. Not a hair count, not a lab result. She just forgot. That's when she knew something real had shifted. I know that's a lot to hold on to. Here's what it means in plain terms. You do one thing at a time, in the right order, and you know why you're doing it. That's a real change from throwing several things at the problem at once, with no way to tell what actually worked. There's something about this assessment I don't usually put in a video. I think it matters more than the polished version of the story. The first version I built wasn't 40 questions, it was 12. I figured that was plenty. 4 systems, 3 questions each, score it, done. I ran it on the next handful of patients who came through my practice after Rachel. It got 3 of them wrong. Not close but off wrong, actually wrong. One woman I was completely confident was Pattern 1. Cold hands, tight scalp, all the classic signs. She scored Pattern 1 on my 12-question version. Turned out her real pattern was Pattern 2. Her absorption failure had been so severe and gone on for so long that it had created a real circulation problem downstream. I wasn't looking at the downstream effect and reading it as the main event. 12 questions wasn't enough to catch that she had 2 patterns stacked on top of each other, one hiding behind the other. That's an uncomfortable thing to sit with as a practitioner. I built something, used it with confidence, and got a real person's primary pattern wrong. Not a small miss either, wrong enough that if she'd followed the protocol I would have handed her from that first version, she'd have spent weeks working on the wrong system entirely. So I went back and rebuilt it. 40 questions instead of 12. 10 per system instead of 3. You need enough data points to actually separate a primary pattern from a secondary one hiding underneath it. I built in the tiebreaker rule. Pattern 2 wins close calls, specifically because of that case. Absorption failure is quiet. It doesn't always announce itself the way a circulation problem does, with cold hands and a scalp you can feel is tight. It just sits underneath everything else, making every other system's work less effective. A short test misses it constantly. I also built in what I call the right diagnosis check. If someone completes the assessment and the result generally doesn't match what they're living with day to day, I want to know. The first version taught me that even a good assessment gets it wrong sometimes. Pretending it never will helps nobody. The version you'd use today exists because 3 real people got misdiagnosed by an earlier version of it first. I don't love that part of the story, but I'd rather tell you the true version than the tidy one. Let's spend a few minutes here. I think it matters where you're standing right now. Maybe you've tried things that didn't work. Nutrafol, minoxidil, PRP, iron, rosemary oil, some functional medicine plan. None of that was wasted time. It doesn't make you the exception, the one woman whose body just won't respond to anything. Everything you've tried had a real reason behind it. None of it was pointless. Minoxidil opens blood vessels right at the spot you apply it. It generally works for women whose hair loss comes from local, shrinking follicles. No deeper circulation problem underneath. But if your pattern 1 is primary, the blood vessels feeding your follicles are already tight everywhere, not just at the surface. Widening one small stretch of a blocked pipe doesn't move more water through the whole line. Iron bisglycinate is the right form of iron. It's better absorbed, gentler on your stomach, but if you're dealing with pattern 2, low stomach acid, high hepcidin, the form was never the issue. Getting it into your blood is. PRP, that's platelet-rich plasma. A practitioner draws your blood, spins it down, and injects the concentrated growth factors back into your scalp. It genuinely stimulates follicles at the injection site. That part of the science is solid, but it's a local treatment. It does nothing for the circulation problem behind pattern 1, nothing for absorption behind pattern 2, nothing for the cortisol signal behind pattern 3. If the upstream system driving your hair loss isn't touched, PRP can produce a short bump that fades once the treatment ends. The actual cause was never addressed. That's part of why so many women describe PRP as working for a few months and then quietly stopping. Nutrafol is worth naming because it's probably the single most common thing women have already tried before finding this video. The 2018 study behind it enrolled women with self-perceived stress-related thinning tied to stress, diet, or their cycle, not a chronic pattern hair loss, not PCOS or PMOS-driven hair loss, not an absorption problem. If your primary pattern is 1, 2, or 4, that formula was built for a mechanism that isn't yours. It's not a bad product. It's a product tested on a narrow slice of women and marketed to everyone. Rosemary oil really does hold up against 2% minoxidil in the research, but only for a scalp with normal blood flow, not for a scalp whose delivery route is blocked by pattern 1. Ashwagandha lowers cortisol. For someone whose cortisol runs high at night, that's the right move. For someone whose curve is already flat, already burned out, already running low, it's not. It can push what's left down even further. Spironolactone is another common one, usually prescribed for hormonal hair loss tied to androgens. It works by blocking androgen receptors. For presentation where excess androgen sensitivity is genuinely the main driver, it can help, but it does nothing for circulation, nothing for absorption. Your hormone pattern might be cortisol driven instead, pattern 3, not an androgen heavy presentation. If so, you can end up on a medication with real side effects, one that was never aimed at your actual mechanism. And then there's the stack itself. A lot of women I talk to are taking 4 to 5 things at once by the time they find me. Iron, biotin, a multivitamin, maybe ashwagandha, maybe a hair-specific blend on top of all of it. Nothing wrong with any single ingredient necessarily. But biotin, in high doses, can throw off thyroid lab results, giving you a falsely measuring TSH reading. Zinc, taken long-term, without copper alongside it, is the exact mechanism that broke Rachel's absorption. You're taking several things at once, no idea which one is helping, no idea which one is doing nothing, no idea which one might be working against the other. That isn't a stack, it's noise. You can't learn anything from a body that's getting 5 inputs at once. None of these were the wrong tool, they were aimed at the wrong layer. And you can't find the right layer until you ask which system broke first. That's not something you did wrong, it's a gap in almost every model that came before this one. Let me address something directly. I hear it in almost every message I get from women considering this. My case is different. I've got too much going on. A scored system like this won't be able to sort me out. I understand exactly where that comes from. So let me tell you about a patient who walked in with that exact same doubt. Her name was Claire. Claire came to her first appointment with a folder. 18 months of quarterly labs, each one annotated in her own handwriting. Notes from 4 separate practitioner appointments. 2 GPs, a dermatologist, and a functional medicine doctor. She'd also built her own supplement protocol from research she'd done herself. It was genuinely well put together. Better, honestly, than what a lot of practitioners would have recommended. She told me straight out, before we'd even gone through intake, that she didn't think a questionnaire could make sense to her. She tried to figure out her own pattern 3 separate times on her own, using bits and pieces of things she'd read. She'd come up with 3 different answers each time. Her symptoms overlapped in ways that didn't fit neatly anywhere. Here's what I want you to sit with for a second. The complexity she was describing wasn't a reason the framework would fail her. It was exactly the situation the framework exists for. Her scored results came back pattern 4 primary, inflammation and reactivity, in about 20 minutes. What made it click wasn't the score itself. It was going back through her own 14 months of logs, the one she'd kept carefully, and noticing something. Her worst shedding weeks lined up almost every time, 2 to 3 days after she'd eaten dairy or something heavy in refined sugar. She'd actually written that correlation down herself months earlier. She just never connected it to a system. She thought it was a coincidence, or maybe her body was being sensitive, and left it at that. That's the part that gets missed constantly. Complicated cases usually aren't complicated because they don't fit a pattern. They're complicated because the pieces are scattered. Across appointments, across logs, across offhand comments nobody ever put back into one place. Claire had already collected almost everything she needed. She just didn't have the structure to read what she'd collected. Maybe you've already tried to self-diagnose 2 or 3 times and landed somewhere different each time. That's not a sign this won't work for you. If anything, it means you've already got more raw material to work with than most people walking in cold. You just need the right question asked of it. Before we get into the practical part, I want to deal with 2 things that actually stop most women from doing anything about this. It's not the biology. You've got the biology now. It's your doctor, and it's the money you've probably already spent. Both of those have a real way through them, and I'm going to show you what's worked for other patients of mine. There's a second kind of doubt worth addressing here. It's less about your body and more about everything standing between you and your body. The most common version is your doctor. A lot of women watching this have already tried to get free T3, reverse T3, or serum copper added to a standard panel. Been told that TSH is normal, so it isn't necessary, or that ferritin's already on the sheet, so no need to duplicate it. That's a real wall, and I'm not going to pretend it isn't. Here's what actually worked for patients of mine who've hit that wall. Bring a specific, narrow ask instead of a general one. Not, can we do more things? Something like this. My ferritin has moved, but my shedding hasn't. Can we check serum copper and ceruloplasmin to rule out an absorption issue? That's a clinical sentence a GP can act on. It names a specific mechanism and a specific reason. Vague requests get vague pushback. Specific ones tend to get specific answers. And if a particular doctor still won't order it, direct-to-consumer lab services exist now that don't require a doctor's request at all. That wasn't true even a decade ago. It's true now. The wall that used to be an absolute isn't anymore. The second version of this doubt is money. Let me be honest about it instead of glossing past it. A lot of women get to this point after spending real money already. Sometimes a few $100s on a supplement stack, sometimes thousands on PRP or a longer functional medicine program. Adding one more thing to that pile understandably feels like throwing good money after bad. Here's what I've noticed watching this play out across a lot of cases. Most women are taking 3, 4, sometimes 5 supplements at once. At least one of them doesn't match their actual pattern at all. Sorting that out first, figuring out what to stop rather than what to add, usually saves more money in the first month than anything new costs. That's just what happens once you know which system you're dealing with. Half the guesswork falls away. Guesswork is expensive. The third version is quieter. It's time. You're already exhausted managing this. The idea of one more protocol, one more thing to track, feels like too much on top of everything else. I hear that. I don't want to wave it away. But the actual daily requirement here is small. 20 minutes once to answer the questions. After that, it's a supplement stack you're probably already managing some version of in a different order. It's not a second job. It's the same effort you're already spending pointed at a thing that's actually broken instead of the thing you've assumed was broken. None of these obstacles are imaginary. The doctor thing is real, the money thing is real, the exhaustion is real, but none of them are permanent walls either. Each one has an actual way through it. None of that way through requires you to wait for your body to somehow get easier to treat. Here's what actually happens once you know your primary pattern. You'll get a personalized protocol. Doesn't mean much on its own. Let me show you what that looks like in practice. The first thing that changes is your lab work. Standard ranges tell you what counts as disease. They were never built to tell you what your follicles need to grow. There's a second column, the functional range. Ferritin above 70 instead of above 15. TSH under 2 instead of under 4.5. That column almost never makes it onto a printed lab report. Once you know your pattern, you know exactly which of those numbers matter for you, instead of chasing all of them at once. The second thing that changes is your supplement stack. Usually it gets smaller, not bigger. I mentioned this earlier. Most women arrive already taking several things. Once you know your pattern, you can see clearly which ones are working toward your mechanism, and which ones were aimed at a system that isn't your primary break. Stopping the wrong ones is usually the first thing that happens before anything new gets added. The third is the order things happen in. This is the piece that gets skipped almost everywhere else. Say you're in pattern 2 with pattern 1 running secondary. Absorption work comes first for a few weeks. Circulation support gets layered in after. Say you're pattern 3 and pattern 1 together. Calming your nervous system in the evening comes before the circulation piece. Elevated cortisol will undercut it otherwise. That sequencing isn't guesswork. It follows directly from which system broke first. The fourth is knowing what to actually say at your doctor's next appointment. My hair is falling out and I don't know why. That gets you nowhere. A specific ask tied to a specific mechanism gets you a real answer instead of a shrug. None of this replaces working with a practitioner if your case needs that level of care. Overlapping conditions, Hashimoto's, PCOS, a longer history of gut issues, those deserve someone looking at the fuller picture with you. But even then, walking in already knowing your primary pattern changes the conversation. You're not starting from your labs are normal. You're starting from here's what I think is actually happening, and here's why. Here's what I want you to walk away with. You're not the exception. You're not the one woman whose body won't respond to anything, no matter what you throw at it. You're the woman who's been asking a genuinely good question. Which number needs fixing? And that question has an edge to it. Once the number is already in range and your hair is still falling out, a different question has to come next. Which of your 4 internal systems broke first? That's answerable using symptoms you already have. No new lab panel, no new appointment, no starting from scratch. You're not the woman who's tried everything and failed. You're the woman who's about to try the right thing first. If this is where you're at, start with a quiz. It's free. It takes about 4 minutes, 10 questions, gives you a starting direction on your pattern. The link's in the description below. When your result comes back, actually read the description, not just the score. It names things you've probably been living with for months, maybe years, without ever connecting the dots. Symptoms you've normalized. Things you mentioned once and let go. See how much of it sounds like your last 2 years. That's your signal right there. I've been practicing traditional Chinese medicine for over 10 years now, and the thing that still gets to me, the thing I don't think I'll ever fully get past, is how big the gap is between what's available to women dealing with hair loss and what they actually need. The gap between your labs are normal and here's the system that broke first, and here's what to do about it in order. That gap is real, it's wide, and it's not because the practitioners saying your labs are normal were bad at their jobs. They were reading off the exact column the standard model was built to read from. There's another column, the hair growth optimal one, ferritin 70 to 100, TSH under 2, free T3 above 3, copper in range, ceruloplasmin high enough to actually move iron, cortisol with a normal morning rise and evening drop. That column was never on your lab report. It's on the one I gave Rachel. It's the framework that came out of the silence of that appointment. It took years of clinical work across a lot of cases to get it right. You won't find this in a book or course. It came from watching, case after case, what happens the moment the standard model runs out of road. If you've been told your labs are fine and your hair is still falling out, you were right that something was missing. This is what it looks like once someone actually goes and finds it. You're just one pattern away. The quiz is in the description below. It's free, about 4 minutes, 10 questions. You'll get a starting direction on your pattern, which of the 4 systems is likely your main break. Read the description with your result, not just the label. If you want to go deeper after that, the guide has everything. The full 40-question test, the complete 30-day plan matched to your pattern, the lab reference, the supplement audit, the GP script. That link's in the description too. Start with the quiz first though. The guide is built around already knowing your pattern. If you want to go deeper after that, the guide has everything. The full 40-question test, the complete 30-day plan matched to your pattern, the lab reference, the supplement audit, the GP script. That link's in the description too. I still get caught off guard by how many people message me after finding their pattern results. They say it's the first time anything's actually described what's happening in their body. Not just what's wrong, but what's actually happening and why. That's what I'm hoping this does for you too. I'll see you in the next one.